we're ready for our ninth speaker. This is Coach Jimmy. Jimmy Hayes Newton. Jimmy has, he's a high performance business coach, and he's been doing that for over 10 years, a decade. Jimmy's unique skill is helping his clients connect their stories, so their personal internal stories, to the product that they have or the idea, creating a strong know, like, and trust factor. He's got an incredible story of transformation in his life as well. I think a lot of us who serve, we have these dynamic transformation stories that we know we got to experience, and we like helping birth people through those so they don't have to, hit it as hard as we did, perhaps. So Jimmy is like committed right now to helping people live a well-crafted life. And I'm an artist. I love the creativity of art, but I love craftsmanship. I love when something is well conceived and well crafted. So Jimmy, thank you for coming into our show, our community, and we're really excited to chat with you.
Thanks, Anne. I've been looking forward to this all day. It's so nice to see you today, and I love the artwork behind you as well.
Yeah, thank you. So, do you want to just? I think it's lovely for our community to be able to get a little bit of a taste of the journey that brought you into the passion-filled work that you do right now.
Yeah, what's funny, as I was sitting and preparing this to talk to you, to talk to your audience, I really got to thinking, like, where did this start, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was like, this whole thing started in the first grade.
I love origin stories.
So I grew up in West Texas, in Lubbock, Texas, as a kid, and I went to Murphy Elementary School, and I was thinking about this. And so in the first grade at Murphy Elementary, the whole elementary school, we were doing like a Christmas play, but each class had a different like presentation they were going to do. Yeah. And our first grade class got picked to do the musical number called Too Fat for the Chimney, which was a gripping tale about how Santa Claus was not going to be able to deliver presents and come down chimneys because he was too fat for the chimney. And
there's a like that too, the she's too fat for me.
And so this is like the early 80s. And this was kind of before there was a childhood obesity epidemic. I really was like the only heavy kid in my class.
Wow.
And at the time, I don't know if this was factual, but I was the only kid I knew from a broken home also at that time. So I didn't have a lot of confidence. And I just thought, here's my opportunity. Like, this musical number is about a fat guy coming down a chimney, and like chubby little Jimmy, like, here's my shot. And they ended up picking my best friend, Justin Martin, to be Santa Claus, skinniest kid in class, popular guy. And so what they did is they wrapped a bunch of pillows around him, put him in a Santa outfit, and all the rest of my friends, they put in like Jane Fonda jazzercise outfits with like the headbands and the leg warmers, and all of them they put upstage. So upstage is like furthest away from the audience, where it's safe, all together up there. And they literally did like an aerobic step routine with Santa Claus. Yours truly, my dear sweet granny, made me like a onesie feety pajamas that like zips up, and the stocking cap and the little drop bottom on the bum. Had to crawl into that and push my chubby little self to the edge of the stage to sing the solo Too Fat for the Chimney. And I looked out amongst the rest of these elementary school kids and parents, and I could feel my stomach and my throat. But I opened my mouth, and it was too fat for the chimney, too fat for the chimney. And I saw a nod just like that. I saw a smile. And it was the first time in my life I really remember getting a positive reaction from a peer group. And I look back on it and I'm like, that was the origin of me knowing that what I was put on this earth to do was to get an emotional response from an audience. Now, what's crazy is sometimes when we are introduced to whatever our gifting is, we really quickly make a list of reasons in our head why it will never happen. Like we know there's something in our gut that said, and this is what you're designed for. Jimmy, this is what you're designed for. And we immediately dismiss it because it was, well, you're too fat. Who knows if there's other people that could sing better than you do. As I progressed and growing older, it was, we didn't have the money to go to the schools that I wanted to. And what I found was there was really this seed of resentment that was that was buried and started sprouting within me. And I really developed what I kind of call a victim mentality. I got really good at explaining away my situations, explaining why, oh, well, other people can do this and I can't because you don't understand my situation. It's not my fault the body I'm in. It's not my fault that I'm having to try to work 2 jobs and go to a school when somebody else is having school paid for them. And I was really good at justifying and explaining away why I was where I was in my life. And it got more and more frustrating. And I really got more and more bitter as I wanted to perform. I wanted to go to these certain schools. I wanted to be on stages. And we're like, well, Jimmy, we can't even send you. We can't afford to even for you to go audition at these places. And I kept trying and failing. And every time I was in a situation that just didn't feel right, I literally would run move like from Dallas to Oklahoma to Florida until I found myself 100 pounds overweight, a 3-time college dropout. And my mom, well, I was school at the time in Florida. My mom calls me. She says, "Hey, Jimmy, we're worried about you. We appreciate that you have a dream. We see all these collection agency bills piling up. All your bills keep coming here to the house. We see that you've maxed out 3 credit cards. We think you should come home." And I so desperately wanted to fight. I wanted to fight and be like, "No, this is my dream. I'm going to go for this thing. I'm going to do this." And I just surrendered in that moment because I knew she was right. And so to move back here to Texas, we'd moved to Dallas where I am now by that point.
Because there's no place like home. There's no place like home.
Years old to come
But
move
it's
back in with your
all
parents.
home. I mean,
And really that dream in me died when I moved back too. I went from pursuing something to bartending and waiting tables here in Dallas. And literally I would wake up each morning just thinking, how am I going to make it to the end of the day? There was like nothing exciting. It was just this same old.
Yeah.
And I remember there was, and so I wasn't excited to get up, and I was sleeping really late in the day. It was like an avoidance thing, right? I'm not getting up until like 10 or 11 in the afternoon, noon sometimes. And I remember there was one day I was running late to get ready to go work a shift at the bar. And I jump in the shower real quick, and I get out of the shower and I wrap the towel around me. And normally being 100 pounds overweight doesn't spend a whole lot of time in front of mirrors, but for whatever that, I know, right? So for whatever reason that day, I just stopped, and I didn't respect the guy looking back at me. And I literally thought, who's going to love this? Like, Jimmy, if you don't change, this is your life. You are no longer a kid. You are a 22-year-old adult living at home. Something has to change. And I tell people in that moment, there really was a turning point. Now, like the heavens didn't open and there wasn't like a flash of lightning and all of a sudden like Coach Jimmy was born out of that moment. But it's funny. I keep this sticky note here that looks at me all the time. And it simply says, "Are you willing to be willing?" And the reason I do this is because in that moment, I had to ask myself, Jimmy, are you willing to be willing to try something different, to think differently, to be open to some feedback? Because back then I wasn't open to things. I got very defensive. And it wasn't that people hadn't tried to help me before. I was just very closed off and stubborn and closed-minded. Why things wouldn't work. It was all out of like a protection and just hurt little Jimmy, like inside there that had built up all these walls. But it's crazy. And when you shift and decide in your mind, I'm at least going to be open to things, the universe has an amazing way of showing you all these resources that have been around you this whole time that you never saw because you weren't looking for it. I think we've all had that time where, let's say you're going to buy a new car and all of a sudden you see that car everywhere and you're like, did everybody decide to get this car right now? Right. And it was just, we changed the frequency on what we were looking for. And that it was the same thing with me. And all of a sudden I started finding resources. There was a guy that I had been waiting tables with and bartending the whole time. And I was like, oh, you know what? Jeremy's been dropping some weight. And it's funny. I envy you ladies because you ladies do such a great job when something's working for you. Y'all talk, y'all ask each other like, what are you doing? Or like, what's that workout? Or what's the makeup? Or what's the hair product? Or what? Like we guys, you don't roll up and go like, hey, Jeremy, you look pretty good in your jeans, bro. Like, what are you doing? Like there's this stupid male ego that gets in the way there. And maybe it isn't necessarily just a gender specific thing, but sometimes we want something, we see something someone else has, and we still won't humble ourselves enough to just simply ask.
Yeah, and
then,
when you just open that little crack, when you just say, I'm open to thinking about being open even.
absolutely. And what's crazy is when he told me, he was like, oh, I'm doing these DVDs. He was doing in-home workouts. I literally cut him off. Like, he couldn't get the last D out of his mouth. And I'm aging myself with DVDs now, so I know.
Right.
I was just coming out of the VHS world, right? But here's what's crazy. I was like, I'm out. I'm not doing your Jane Fonda workouts. And this is the other thing that's crazy. We see somebody having success in any area of our life. We finally humble ourselves enough to ask them, what are you doing? Then when they tell us, we still want to go, oh, that doesn't work, or that wouldn't
We
work for me.
trivialize it. Yeah.
That's one of, those things don't work. Or I had a friend that tried that.
Yeah.
And we're literally staring at like proof that this works for somebody. And we still go, oh, well, that's not going to work. And so that was me. And so I literally, so I continued to wait. I continued to get no results. And sometimes the pain point has to get like high.
That's why,
right?
That's why sometimes you don't really want people keeping you from the pain. You want to get there as quickly as possible.
One of my favorite stories, Les Brown tells this story about there's an old man sitting out on his porch with his dog. And his little boy, you know this story, right? Little boy comes by, the dog's like moaning and groaning. He's like, mister, what's wrong with your dog? And he's like, oh, he's laying on a nail. He's like, well, why doesn't he move? He's like, oh, it doesn't hurt enough to move. It just hurts enough to moan and groan. And I feel like that's where a lot of us live our lives. And we don't looking at it. We're not complaining. I'm just explaining. I'm just right, saying.
And then we hover around other people doing the same thing. And pretty soon it's all you do all day.
Yeah, because you want to share your pain with those people, right?
And then it justifies there are other people doing this, and we're all in the same boat, and life sucks, and it's just not fair.
Yeah. And so finally, I said, okay, I don't even think it was like $100 to get started with him, but it might as well have been $1 million to me because like I said, I'm 3 maxed out credit cards, and I'm like, okay, but I got to put some skin in the game. I got to step out, and I didn't change. It wasn't this. I love the fact that we're doing this at the first of the year, because what I see so many people do, whether it's with their mindset, whether it's with their health and fitness, whether it's with their business, they think they need to make this major overhaul. We have somewhere in our society, we have fallen into this, what I call the all or nothing trap, that I have to do things 1,000% or nothing. And there's not these little tiny adjustments of what's something 1% different I can do, and repeat that until that 1% different becomes my new, and then add another piece. And we put this ridiculous pressure on ourselves to go, and we think it's really noble. I've had people tell me this, like, Jimmy, I really, I know what you say. I would love to work with you, but I'm not going to start until I can do it 100%, or I can do it full out. And we feel like it's this really noble thing. We're like, well, that's noble, because why would you do anything less than 100%? Yeah. But it's procrastination in disguise.
Yeah, and if I could add to that,
right?
If I could add to that, when you get started on something, you've been doing the other thing for so long that the chances are you will have some regression. You will have some times where you fail. And if you throw the baby out with the bathwater each time you fail, instead of just saying, well, I kind of expect that every so often I might need to pull back up.
I look at it as somebody climbing up a mountain, right? So especially when I was working just primarily in health and fitness, I would get these people that like, oh, Jimmy, I fell off the wagon. They would miss a workout, or they would binge eat, or they would drink too much or something. And they would go, do I need to start over? And I'm like,
you can't.
Well, no, but it's funny because I kept hearing this, and all of a sudden it dawned on me. It's a trap, because we start thinking, oh, this is what happens. I get 2 weeks in and I get injured, or I fall off the wagon, and we're like, this is what I do. So we start expecting it at a certain point. Like, I can only put 2 solid days together. I can put a week together. But here's what happens when we think of it as starting over. So if I'm starting up a mountain and I've just taken, let's say for a week, little by little, I'm working my way up that mountain, but I take a wrong step and I sprain my ankle. Now, I'm not going to voluntarily roll all the way back down the mountain. What I may do is set up a base camp. And first I got to look and turn around and go, look, you know what? We've come a little distance. And we celebrate how far we've come before maybe we misstep. But we don't voluntarily walk all the way back to the bottom of the mountain to start over. You set up base camp, you dust yourself off, you heal up a little, and you keep going. Because every time we tell ourselves we're starting over, that mountain gets bigger in our heads. Instead of going, cool, I'm
Demoralizing.
here and I'm just going to pause. I'm going to regroup. I may need to like check in with somebody or get some encouragement or work with a coach or whatever that is. And then we're going to keep going. And it doesn't put that same kind of fail, this like, oh, I failed. And again, it's like, oh, it wasn't perfect, so I'm going to go back down to zero. Cause that's a gnarly trap,
That's demoralizing because you feel like all the effort you put in was for nothing.
Yeah.
But if you know that you are a variation in your path way up the mountain, you're going to come up to obstacles, but you're not at ground zero again. You're starting part way up. It's a lot more. It's just hearing you say it that way. It relieves you
Yeah.
of internal pressure.
And I had a mentor that I started working with about that time. It was the first time in my life I'd really been coachable, that I would take some feedback. But man, I was trying to like, I was on this health and fitness journey. I was trying to start a business and I was trying to do the things. And I remember getting frustrated, like stuff wasn't working. And one of my first mentors said, Jimmy, I can give you all the steps, but if I can't change the way you think, it's really not going to matter. And so he asked me, he's like, let me ask you, what are you reading? And I'm like, dude, I dropped out of college 3 times. I don't do a whole lot of reading. He's like, well, what are you listening to? Like, what are you filling your mind with? I'm like, I don't know. I get up and I turn on Sports Center or the news or, I don't know. So he started challenging me. He's like, Jimmy, I want you to read 10 pages of a good book a day or listen to some kind of audio. And I tell people this, the biggest battle in my life was not losing 100 pounds. It's not keeping it off over a decade. It is the battle that I choose to fight every day with my mind, because old victim mentality Jimmy still lives in here. And he's still, I was like, okay, what can I do about this? How can I be proactive? And so many of us wake up and we wait to see what kind of day it's going to be. And I was like, this isn't working for me. So I know we all are told not to grab our phones first thing in the morning, but here's the exception to that rule. Literally, when I wake up first thing in the morning, I grab my phone and I go to YouTube, and there's all these different like motivational montages of speakers like Les Brown or Mel Robbins or Chalene Johnson or Tony Robbins or Jim Rohn or Brian Tracy, name your whoever is, Brendan Burchard, all these people that whoever, you kind of jam with. And a lot of times it's a montage of these. And I realized that if like literally when I'm awake, I grab it and push play before I ever and then I get out of bed, bathroom, get down to the kitchen, getting ready for a workout, making coffee, whatever your morning routine is. I realized there was a good 15 to sometimes 30 hidden minutes right there. It wasn't trying to find extra time in my day. It was, and it's funny that I use YouTube because it's not like I'm literally physically watching it. It's just in the background, but it's something that's speaking life into me before my brain had a choice to figure out what it wanted to focus on.
Before it defaults to something from yesterday that wasn't pleasant.
And it's going to default to the negative because that's what our brains are meant to protect us. And so that's how our caveman brains work. And so it's always like, oh, what's wrong? What could go wrong? And so I was like, I need something else. And so, and I've been doing this now for, golly, I don't even know really when it started. But it's now just wrote like every morning that happened, and some of these, and the other thing that I think is really interesting, sometimes I'll hear, these montages, they're the same clips sometimes over and over again, but I think that's a loss. I think so in this information age that we have, we listen to an audio once, we plug into something like this once, or we watch a YouTube video once, and we're like, oh, I've heard that before. But the mother of skill is repetition, right? And it wasn't until I started hearing these things and I could finish their sentences for them that it literally started not becoming, oh, this guy or this woman is telling me this. It started becoming my own philosophy because I would hear it and then also implement it. And I think that's a really important part. There is learned knowledge and then there's applied knowledge, and we need both in life. I think it's really easy also in this information is everywhere, society of we take it in, but we don't apply because again, we think, oh, I don't want to try it until I know I'm going to do it right. And I'm always like, somewhere along the way, we lost the grace to be bad at something before we're good, but you have to. I look at your paintings behind you, like the very first time you ever put ink on a canvas or paint on a canvas, I'm sure it probably felt a little awkward. I'm sure there's probably days still that there's days it flows and there's days that feel clunky. I know as a musical theater major, there were days that I would open my mouth and things would feel awesome. And there were certain days I'm like, I don't think I've ever sang in my life today, you know? And
Yeah, because
that,
every time you do something expanded from where you were, it's something you haven't quite done before.
and it's funny, I had a theater mentor of mine told me, he said, Jimmy, until you learn to fall in love with the process more than the performance, you're always going to be frustrated. And that's literally what part of this is. It's this. I went from a guy that took no feedback, that didn't like to be pushed out of my comfort zone, to somebody who now is really addicted to trying to get 1%. I absolutely love who I am. I celebrate all of Jimmy today, but I'm excited to get 1% better tomorrow. And it's this weird balancing act of not beating ourselves up too much, but also thinking to enjoy the growth process and not looking at it as, oh, people tell me personal growth, there must be something wrong with me in order to tell me I need growth. But I was like, no, but that's life. Like, don't you want to continue to grow and evolve? And I know, like, I just turned 44 years old and I feel like I'm just getting started. You know, it's like, you know, I've been in this game for 15 years now of personal growth and doing this. And I'm excited. Like, what's the next mindset piece? What's the next thing that I can add to my repertoire of, you know, whether it's business, whether it's storytelling skills, whether it's mindset or my workout and physical.
It's so exciting. Yeah. What advice would you give to the audience about taking your vision to reality based on your story?
You know, I think it comes back to what's the one baby step you can add. I would encourage, the first thing I would do is encourage you to be willing to rewrite your story. And what I mean by that is we tend to say, well, I always fill in the blank. Well,
I am this, I am that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just an introvert. I just happen to be a pessimist. I tend to be a realist or whatever, however you want to label these things.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just because at some point in your life, you created that as some kind of protection mechanism, and then you decided to stay in that. And I am living proof. I am a completely different animal than I was when I started this. And people see this version of me and think, oh, Jimmy's always been this guy. Jimmy's always been fit. Jimmy's always been this really like upbeat, positive. And I wasn't. And I wish I had more, like, I wish we documented all of that back then. I wish I could show you these other clips of like this other version of me. And so if I had one step for people, I would tell them to invest in their mindset first thing in the morning. And then what's that one action? Is it waking up 15 minutes earlier and journaling? Is it making the commitment to move your body in the morning? For me, with the work, everything comes back. My workouts and my physical life tie into everything else to me. And so for me to get up and go mindset, move my body, journal, like that's become my routine. And then I'm ready to take on the day. So it's how can you invest in yourself? Because if you'll do that first thing in the morning, and I'm not saying that you can't do it later in the day and there's not things you can do at night.
It makes a big difference to start with it.
I just know, but that life happens during the day. If I waited until it's 3 o'clock, 3:30 here in Dallas right now, and if I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do that at 3:30, I will tell you at 2:45, something unexpected is going to pop up. And so for me, I had to shift all that to the first, and I wasn't a morning person, but again, I didn't go from the guy that slept until noon to the guy now that wakes up at 5 a.m. without an alarm because I'm just excited to get up. I didn't do that overnight. It was in 15-minute little increments and taking these little baby steps and then celebrating these little wins to go, you know what, Jimmy? You made that one step. Attaboy. Pat yourself on the back, whatever that thing is. And you have to find ways to celebrate these little steps.
Yeah, I mean, whenever a lot of people make a vision and it's so intimidating that they don't even know what to do next.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is finding the next thing, whatever is there. And you don't have to have the whole plan formulated. Whatever is the next thing that you're ready to think of and do, you can step into that right away. And then the next thing will present itself. Sorry.
And I'm so glad you said it that way, because here's the other trap. I start talking about that and start talking to someone about taking action and what's your vision and how will you get 1% out. And what happens instead of focusing on that next step, our brain jumps to step number 5. we get so far ahead of ourselves. Well, if I take that step, then this happens, and then this, and that's going to happen there. And I'm like, no. Will you just for a second put away steps 2 through 5 and just take step 1 and let's see. And it's almost like if you were trying to make your way through the forest and you just had a flashlight, you just had a lantern, and all you can see is the next step. Is there a rock there? Is there a snake there? Are we good? Cool. Let's take that step, celebrate it, take the next step, and let's not get so far in front of ourselves, because then we start assuming. It's like the 4 agreements, right? The second one's like, don't assume anything.
Yeah.
And we just assume, oh, well, if I do this, then this is going to happen. And we get to step 4, and that's all assumptions in life, because I did the same thing. But yeah, I had to let that go and say, okay, I'm just going to trust this step today. And I started putting one little step in front of the next one. And then I look up and I'm a completely different person. And I think of like where my life is gone, but it's been one baby step at a time.
You get the right information for the next step when you take the first one. And you're almost better that way, because when you plan way ahead at times, sometimes we don't give ourselves wiggle room to adapt.
I think the one other analogy I've heard about this is like when you get in your car at night to go home, you turn on the headlights, but you can't see your house, but you trust that the headlights are going to show you, each step, each block, every road on the way, you'll eventually get to the house. But if you waited, like, I'm not going to move the car until I can see my house, you're not going to go anywhere. And I forget who I heard say that. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a brilliant analogy.
It's funny too.
Yeah.
So as we sign off, anything else, any last tidbits for living your authentic, purpose-driven vision?
I think you have to find what's that thing. You have a gift, whether you realize it or not. For me, you know what? I was introduced into it in the 1st grade, and there was something about that stage. You have a gift. And right now I know it's really easy for some people to think there's nothing special about me, or there other people do what I do. And I'm telling you, you will execute your gift unlike anyone else. There are other people that work with stories. There are other motivational speakers. There's other people that do what I do, but nobody has walked my path. Nobody has my exact story. And if you're really struggling right now to think about what your gift is, just think about what is that thing that you do that just, it fills you with energy. Like it doesn't drain you. It feels, so for me, it's literally what I'm doing right now. Like I'm going to get off this call and I'm going to float around my house for a while because I'm going to be on cloud 9, but it's that thing that you do with the least amount of effort that just brings you joy. I understand to somebody else, talking into a camera in front of a big audience would paralyze them. It lights me up. And there's something that lights you up too. And I'm going to encourage you to find ways to play in that. Don't worry about, I don't know how to make a business out of this, or I don't know if I can do this for a living. Just find ways to play in it. And it's amazing how the universe will make room and you'll find things and be like, oh, I can do this a lot more. And sometimes that is turning it into a business. And sometimes it's just allowing you to live in that joy and gift on a more regular basis. And that lifts our spirits as well.
In this case, what you're saying is you took one small step into your joy, into your passion. And often we trivialize that because it's like easy for us.
Yeah.
It's because so I mean, we're kind of
easy for us and it's not easy for everybody else. So we downplay it.
Right. We're taught how hard things need to be valuable. And it might be our truest gift is kind of easy for us. So sometimes we overlook it, but then you take just a step into it and it opens more doors. Another step opens more doors. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Jimmy Nelson, thank you so much for taking the time to share your energy and your story, and just another way for us to conceptualize how to take a vision and step into it and actually start taking action on it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann. It's been a great day. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Take care.